You have a telephone? I haven't seen one of those in ages.
I know.
Gen Z doesn't even know what those are.
I know. I know. Oh, this is crazy.
Oh
All
my
right. All
gosh.
right.
Bring out the
Let's do
relic.
it. Oh my
All
gosh.
right. Welcome back to the How to Relate podcast. I'm here with Bethany Argenio. Hello.
Hey, hey.
What's
How's it
going on?
going?
Good. How are you?
Ready for Valentine's Day, right? We're talking about all things relationships just for you. Although you have one that came out this
Came out
week.
yesterday. Yeah. So one came out yesterday on attachment. So if you're listening to this, it'll be the week of or after Valentine's Day. It'll be the Thursday after Valentine's Day. But Valentine's Day just one continuous holiday that bleeds into every day of the year. It just so happens to be that Valentine's Day is February 14th, which means that we get discounted chocolates on the 15th. And that's the real holiday.
Oh my gosh, I actually love that for you.
Yes. I
Okay.
love that for everyone. I love that everyone gets discounted chocolate and maybe flowers too on the
Yeah,
15th.
absolutely.
Yes.
What's your go-to Valentine's Day like candy?
Oh, okay. If I'm going fancy, I love the Vidiri chocolate, which is local to here in Raleigh. So anything
Wait,
Vidiri. You've never
what?
been? Oh my
No,
gosh.
I'm a slow, transient person who's like still catching up on all these cultural Raleigh I treasures.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I would be more than happy to show you around some of these cultural treasures. So Vidiri, local chocolate. Escazu, also local chocolate, which are great. And
Okay.
then if I'm going more general, this is gonna sound so weird. I love a Hershey's peppermint patty.
Oh my gosh.
And then of
Yes.
course Reese's and I also Trader Joe's. Anything Trader Joe's chocolate I
Oh
think is
yeah.
great. And then of course their peanut butter cups. But if I'm going nostalgic back into the
Hmm.
day, yes, I'm obsessed with peppermint patties, which I know
All
is a
right.
very strange cake.
No, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I miss the days where, like, speaking of relationships and connection, right? I truly miss those days when we're in like the second grade and we'd like get the little Valentine's Day cards from all your little peers that would go around, right? Like,
Yes.
Happy Valentine's Day. And they'd have the little hearts, the sweetheart candies.
Oh
Do you
my
remember
gosh,
those?
yes.
Yeah.
The sweetheart candies and the heart-shaped Jolly Rancher lollipops.
Ooh, okay. There we go. There we go.
Yes.
Yes.
Jacqueline, Jacqueline did her.
Uh-huh.
She buys Valentines and hands them out to her clients. I saw her today, got one. She just hands them out to anyone. And she also, I know the moment has passed by the time this comes out, but it doesn't mean the idea can't be passed along. That if you are single and you just want to kind of give someone a little Valentine, let's say at your run club or the grocery store or whatever, you can just kind of put your name and your number on it. Just pass it along. Just say, oh, I just
Perfect.
had an extra and decided you needed a Valentine, so I wanted to give this to
Yeah.
you.
What happened to that? We need that. It needs to come back. It needs to come back.
Bring back the analog things that really put yourself out there.
That's definitely what it's about. And I think that that is like the biggest challenge today, right? There's a lot more freedom, but a less of those like relationship skills that we need. And we're almost scared to connect with people, right? We value so much of that emotional independence more than ever. And I think that's going to be like such a beauty of what we talk about today with a little bit of emotionally focused therapy. And I always like to say, like, it's not my way or the highway when it comes to podcasts and just sharing information. I'm not here to tell you what the best model is. We all have these model wars, right? Like, I love that you do work with Esther Perel. Anytime I come to some of your networking events, you're always pulling out like some Esther Perel. I have friends that kind of follow more of the Terry Real model, which I know is very big and up and coming. And
Emotional life
um,
therapy. Yeah.
yep, yep. I love the Gottmans. Julie and John Gottman have given us such rich research. And then, I just found emotionally focused therapy, and that was kind of what worked for me and really aligned with my true authentic self. And um, I don't know. think you got to find what kind of works for you. And yeah, we need to bring it all back. We need those relationship skills, right? But,
Absolutely.
or I think we're
What
so scared of like friction from life.
how right. How do you think that impacts couples? Because I do wonder this when people, because we are in such an individualized society, I
Hmm.
do wonder how that translates from dating and being so hyper independent, hyper individualistic into coupledom and what that looks like. Because if we're not practicing those skills as much, or it's not as fluid, or it doesn't feel like it comes with ease,
Yeah.
then I do think that impacts a couple relational dynamic.
I mean, absolutely. I think, and especially right, the older we get, we're so set in those ways, right?
Mhm.
I think to your point, we really are a society that is just so adverse to any type of pain. And I think like, right, I'm not talking about the pain like, ouch, I fell and got a boo-boo and I need a band-aid. There is physical pain, absolutely, but also any emotional pain. And I think we're just so adverse to that, right? Think about it. We can literally do everything from our couches now. We can shop, we can order food, we can watch TV, we can text someone to solve a problem, we can get on ChatGPT and do our homework. Like, we can't live in the discomfort of things. And so I think that the more we're now trying to get exposed to discomfort, which is going to come up naturally in relationships, the harder it is. Our threshold to really sit in that discomfort is really hard. And that's what's making repair so hard. I think, especially for a lot of the couples I work with, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Because
want to make sure I'm answering your question because I think I
yeah,
want to
I,
really hear it.
I no, I love that answer because what I'm hearing is friction feels like that means that there is something wrong. Because we live in such a frictionless world, any sort of friction feels like it's a pathology.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's some of the beauty of EFT. We are such a non-pathologizing practice, right? I mean, and I know I hear it all the time with the population I work with, right? There's that cliche kind of, you know, way of thinking of like, oh, well, oftentimes you have a borderline and a narcissist coming into your office for couples therapy, right? And the thing is, like, we can't label people like that. We have to realize the essence of just like being humans is we're all gonna have little intricacies and protective strategies. And I'm fearful that with social media, more than ever, we're just boxing people in. We're making people enemies instead of saying, hey, yeah, let's sit in the friction, let's sit in the discomfort. It's easier, right? You see this, it's so funny, and I'm probably going so off topic here for you, but you see this reel that's been popping up left and right, and you're someone that's a single female. I'm a single female, and I do want to say like it is a privilege to be here, and I recognize my identity here today as like a white cisgendered female. But I am mindful that everybody listening to this has different social identities. But you do see this reel lately that's like the happiest people in life are married men and single females. And I think like that is a testament to just so much shifting societally and expectations and the friction, right? And integrating people into our life when we're so independent, you know,
Mhm.
you do. I mean, I think of Darwin, right? Like,
Yeah,
yes, it is survival of fittest, but we could not survive without each other.
right, right.
Um,
That what gets a lot of clicks online is kind of the enemy talk. It's this versus that, and whether that's men versus women, red versus blue. I mean, we're seeing a lot of us versus them, and it does get a lot of clicks. It's more it clickbait is 5 ways to spot a narcissist. But the clickbait isn't 5 ways that you can be a
yeah.
narcissist. Like, that doesn't get as many clicks. So if I can spot it, then that means that it's feeding into the I know better. I got this. I don't,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
identify you, or I can, kind of pathologize you and diagnose you with this thing. So it's way more spicy. And
Yeah,
what's spicy gets reviews.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think like kind of going back to your point around like it's hard for people to enter these relationships together. I think, and we're getting really philosophical here and like this is
Hmm.
great because I love geeking out to you this stuff with you, but like
Yeah.
it's almost like we live in a society now that has this messaging of like trust no one, right? And
Right. Oh,
mistrust. Yeah. Oh, I saw
especially
you light
now
up when I
with,
said
I mean, with what's happening right now, we're February 13th, 2026, and
fair,
we are
fair.
in the middle of the Epstein files being
Yes.
released to their fullest
Mhm.
capacity. So really, and whose name isn't in it? It really feels like a trust no one time, especially right now.
Yeah, it is. And that's what society is teaching us. Don't trust. And so if that's the bigger protective strategy we're using in our everyday, day-to-day kind of hoopla or milieu of life, how can you code switch so easily and just turn that off in certain arenas of your life,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
know, it's tricky.
So true. It is
Where do
tricky.
you want to go? I like totally got us off track here.
No, I look, this is very conversational. This is a freestyle podcast. So, you mentioned EFT a couple of times, so emotionally focused
Sure.
therapy. How would you define emotionally focused therapy, and what drew you to EFT in particular?
Can you repeat the last part for me?
Sure. What drew you to EFT?
Oh, what drew me to EFT? Oh gosh. Yeah, so emotionally focused therapy is definitely a highly effective therapy. And that was pioneered in about the 1980s by Sue Johnson. And it's really based on this principle that emotions are really central to our experiences and relationships in life, right? So EFT, like I said, is non-pathologizing. And really, when we think about EFT, it's the integration of three theories. It's experiential theories, like so we got some Rogerian in there, right? It's systematic. And then we have the attachment theory with Bowlby. And so this is a treatment that really honors the need for connection, support, um, and honestly, the research we're seeing with it, Brittany, is like 70 to 75% success rate. A ton of research on this model. It really is a gold standard. I would say, like, there are so many times I go into consultation with my consultant. Shout out to Maria Wood. She's amazing for anybody looking for EFT consultation. And she says, Bethany, a little EFT is better than none for these couples. So, really, it's rooted in this idea that we need individuals, we need connection, right? Attachment's innate and a motivating force. And dependency in our culture, like you and I had just kind of discussed, has been really pathologized. But really, we need dependency. That's our survival instincts, right? We're wired to detect threats to our attachment system, but we need others to help us navigate, attune, and regulate to those threats, right?
Yeah.
So, really, Sue is getting at this point here that when couples come in, there's usually something foundationally that's going wrong in the dynamic between the two of them, right? Um, and we look at this big overarching question you'll hear a lot, and that overarching question is, are you there for me, right? Are you, A, for are you emotionally accessible? R, for are you reliable? And E, are you engaged with me? And usually, when one of those three components, at least what I tell my couples, is starting to feel off, that's when couples come in, right? Because they're getting two things are really coming up for them. They're really getting fearful. They're getting so fearful that they're losing connection with their partner. So EFT is going to kind of come in as a modality that we use to help couples start to understand how their lack of repair and their lack of ability to have kind of a good conflict or fight, right, and repair, um, can really lead them into a negative place of disconnection. So we teach them what their cycle is. We teach them what are their protective strategies that they're displaying towards their partners that's keeping them in this negative space. And then we're helping them really deepen their stories and express their longings and fears from a very deep, vulnerable place when we create that safety in the sessions. And then, the third stage I kind of think of, and this might be off cuff, is like when we want to bring in those solutions to help them figure out, okay, like, yeah, we dropped off the kids at, 5 o'clock, but you weren't there. Can we like rearrange our schedules and problem solve together and compromise, right?
Yeah,
Um, so it's interesting, the process of separation distress is really predictable, and isolation and loss are traumatizing. And when those kind of components start to enter relationships, we see they can devolve really quickly. Um,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. And what I like about EFT too is it really pioneered the idea, at least in my view, that it's not attachment styles are really attachment strategies. That every course of action that someone takes is to bring someone closer or push away and withdraw. And that these are strategies that are central to our protective parts of us. That
Yeah.
they are, yes, that they've been practiced for a very long time. And there is a
Yeah.
generous interpretation to them that it's and I like to tell couples too that under every criticism is a need, and under every defense is a sense of shame. So when that criticism is trying to pull, is really meant to pull someone closer, because even if it's you didn't unload the dishwasher correctly, you didn't do the thing that I asked you to do, right? It's are you paying attention to me and my needs? And are you there for me? Are you engaged? Are you reliable? That it is trying to answer some of those core questions. And that
Yeah.
the defense strategies is, well, I can't do anything right. So I withdraw and I might stonewall, but really that disconnection is maybe my nervous system is feeling really overwhelmed and I need
Mhm.
space, that I do need to self-regulate before I come back in, or that I
Yeah.
am feeling really
Yeah.
bad and I can't be
Mhm.
around you because it just feels so bad inside of me. So I
Yeah.
like EFT because in that deepening of the emotional experience, you get to hear someone's true feelings beyond what it is that they're saying. What
Yeah.
the partner's hearing is that, you're not there for me or you're not here or whatever it might be. And
Right.
really it's, oh, it sounds like you feel really alone. Oh, it
Yeah.
sounds like you
Yeah.
felt that a deep sense of disappointment in yourself.
Yeah.
And you get to those core emotions. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
EFT does a really great job at going beyond the surface.
Right. It does. So really, we kind of put it in layman's terms for couples, just like you're saying when they walk in the door and we're like, hey, we're here to teach you that you guys are in a dance. And unfortunately, you're out of sync and you're stepping on each other's toes and you're kind of like not really hearing the music the same way. And so, what is happening when you get in a fight? And it's really common, I don't want to get too much in the nitty gritty, but really what we're doing is we're identifying what their cycle is, that their dance that's keeping them off, right? That maintains that distress with the issues that are being expressed, right? And like you're bringing up, you're identifying the emotions that, they're experiencing that are driving the cycle. So usually you'll have, you know, one client who tends to use, I try not to use these terminologies with my clients, but we do have one client that, as an EFT practitioner from a practicing lens, we typically refer to as a pursuer, right? They learn to protect relationships through leaning in. So when things feel off in the relationship, let me lean in. And what they don't realize is often when they're leaning in, they are criticizing.
Mhm.
And but what they're really trying to say in those moments is, I'm hurting. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I feel so alone in this relationship. And then we have, a partner who tends to be more withdrawn. And when things aren't going well in the relationship, right, their idea is like, let me protect this person in this relationship I love so much by keeping the trains on the track. If I lean in, we're gonna like the train's gonna derail. And we don't want that. Um, yeah.
Right.
So Yeah. I think what we do is we start to also tap into some raw spots. So those are little attachment sensitivities that maybe each individual has had in their past that is showing up in their relationship, right? We talk about this very cliche like statement of like, oh, you married your father or you married your mother, right? And there's like a lot of beliefs sometimes of like you marry the parent in which you had an unmet attachment need. So sometimes I'll have withdrawers come in and say things like, hey, when you get really angry with me and when you're yelling and when you're trying to get my attention and telling me what to do and that I didn't do this right or this, you know, I suddenly am brought back to like feeling a moment in time when I was younger and maybe a parent of mine would constantly criticize. And so I'm
Mhm.
just right, their nervous system is just brought right back to those moments.
Mhm.
And, often for my little pursuers, it's this idea of like, I was left alone. I never knew when someone was going to give me love and affection and care, right? Or,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we start to get curious about those too. Um, Usually, I said the words pursuer and avoidantly, and withdrawer. Typically, right? And this is great because you talked about attachment styles last week. But yeah, typically pursuers tend to be a little bit more anxious, and then avoidance. Um, they tend to be a little bit more our withdrawer camp, right? Withdrawers are more avoidant. So, for them, vulnerability and deep closeness is really hard, right?
Mhm.
So that function is available. I know you asked me why I got into EFT. I also want to be mindful of time because I could talk
Yeah,
about this forever with you.
for
Uh,
sure,
but
which I love. Yeah. You Well, you speak really eloquently about it and you talk passionately about it. So I so I can tell that you got into this because it spoke to you in a really deep way. So yeah,
yeah,
how did you meet EFT?
yeah. So I have to be honest. So I'm a trained social worker. I but all of my training started, when I was at grad school. Gosh, almost 13 years ago now. Yeah. I went to Boston College and I loved working with high risk populations, right? But what I was finding, especially working in community mental health, I worked at a clinic in a very unique area in Boston, very stark contrast between like um, socioeconomic status, right? It's one of the richest areas of Boston, and yet also some of the one of the largest Section 8 housing populations we would see. Something that really came to mind to me while I was doing my work there is like there are so many cutting edge research techniques and evidence-based research practices that we aren't providing to clients that really need that. And I was starting to do a lot of research on family work because I was working in the schools and I suddenly came across emotionally focused family therapy. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I eventually, my time at that clinic came to an end. So I did my feet into EFT because I started to get really curious. I was noticing that we're constantly linking so much of dysregulated nervous systems that I was seeing in the work I was doing with my clients with EMDR to a lot of past childhood traumas. And I got very interested in the work of Dini Lolotis, who's an attachment-based EMDR therapist. And then I was like, EFT, this is attachment-based. Yes, let's go. Then obviously through my like own challenges in life, right, of being madly in love with someone for a course of 10 years and, going through divorce and really just learning how relationships are just so vital to who we are and connections we need. I really just took off with the couples work and realized like EFT is it. Like this makes sense to me. And you start when you're doing and learning about EFT, you start to analyze every relationship in your life through that lens. It's insane. And I was like, wow. all right, we're just human. And I also love that it's non-pathologizing, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just,
It speaks to the systems work in social work because
yeah,
it pulls from various modalities. And I believe Sue Johnson was a social worker too, which so it makes sense that we're drawn to this type of work.
yeah,
And it does speak to those core attachment wounds that we have, and
yeah.
that being where a lot of trauma stems from.
Hmm.
And then we're seeing it in our relational dynamics, whether that's family therapy, individual therapy, or with couples. And
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
sounds like that you once, and once you have this information, it's really hard to not see it. So
Yeah. Oh
yeah, when you
gosh.
mentioned that you
Yeah.
look through all of your relationships through the EFT lens, it makes sense because once you start seeing, or once you understand this modality, you start seeing the patterns that
Yeah.
exist.
Hmm.
Yeah, because that negative cycle that you mentioned before of the pursuer withdrawer, and you seeing it playing out and how conflict plays out in a family and how quick conflict can be, but then when you slow it down, you pull it back, and it's going, oh, when my dad would slam the door and walk away and leave my mom there, then that meant that he was walking away and withdrawing, and she was the one who was trying to get the connection, and she was feeling left alone while he was the
Oh
one
yeah.
trying to self-protect by
No.
withdrawing. There's just how it all like unfolds and how that
Right.
impacts us and our nervous systems as kids
Yeah.
to then adapt to those environments. And that we pick
Yeah.
up from our caregivers. We pick up from our the lessons that we learn in our first classroom of love, which is our family of origin.
Oh, I
So
love that so
that is part of
much.
it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
great. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what really just feels so good to me is the piece that Sue emphasizes around just emotional connection. We need it, right?
For sure. And so the deepening of the emotional experience, why
Okay.
do you think that is so core to healing relational wounds? Because we do this in individual therapy, but we can also do it in couples work. But it is a core component in EFT is deepening that emotional experience. Why do you think that works so well?
Yeah, so let's talk about that a lot. Because a lot of times with couples, right, I will say, I think emotions give us the ability to speak from the heart. Does that make sense? Right.
Absolutely.
Like you could say to someone, "Oh, I'm so sorry I did that." Right? "Oh, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings." Right? And that's like very flat affect, very serious face versus, "You know what, Brittany? I am so sorry I did that. I did not mean to show up 5 minutes late. And I can imagine how that impacted you." And that's more heartfelt. And when you bring that emotion from the heart into the room, God, it can be so freaking powerful, right? Those are the moments where couples are leaning in, they're hugging each other, they're crying, they're kissing, they're saying they're sorry. And that's when they soften. And that's when the roadblock to resentment starts to deplete right there in that room. Yeah.
Mhm.
We need that emotion to to really access empathy, right? Because I tell clients all the time, I'm like, you know you're in a regulated place and you can do repair with your partner when you can access empathy, right? That's how you know. That's a cue. Because when we're flooded, our ability to take incoming information just goes out the window.
And I think for a lot of people, that's where conflict becomes a lot bigger is people are flooded, but we try and keep going and fight through it. And we're
Yeah.
not getting anywhere. We're repeating the same things.
Right.
We each are
Right.
dug into our own perspectives.
Yeah.
Though there is a lack of empathy because I want you to understand me and I want you to understand me, and we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. 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 And we need, we really need that. And it's like, and that's hard, right? Some people can't speak from the heart. It's not in their repertoire. I work with, so in my practice, I work with a lot of modern ambitious couples. And oftentimes there are a lot of clients who are, in private equity, investment banking, engineering, professors or lawyers or accountants at one of the big four, working for BCG consulting groups, wherever, I don't know. Um, and they are constantly in the fast lane. Life is fast paced, right? I work with a lot of clients in New York City and Boston, now Raleigh, and I'm very grateful for that. And think about it, their nervous systems are so dysregulated 24/7. For them to stop and slow it down and really be present with their partner and not be flooded, like you're saying, is impossible, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I say is, hey guys, we're going to learn to slow it down in here.
How does that land in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually they know. They know right off the rip. I know I need to slow down. I know I need to get off you know, my phone when my partner's trying to communicate something with me. I know that I have to put some limitations and boundaries up around work. And we'll talk a lot about that with competing attachments, right?
As I say, this is a great segue into competing attachments.
Yeah.
So, what are competing attachments?
Yeah. So competing attachment is a threat to a secure bond. So when we say secure bond or relationship, right? Secure relationship is something that's healthy, right? You feel emotional safety in that. And it's basically a threat in which one person in the relationship turns away from the relationship and turns towards someone or something else to get their emotional needs met, right? So there are a lot of different examples of these, and we can talk about it. And I do want to credit the people that kind of came up with this, and that was Rebecca Jorgensen and I believe Annabelle Bugatti, who studied under her. She kind of talks about it as the mama's boy syndrome, Annabelle, right? Like she's in a relationship with, and again, not trying to be sexist, but the way she described it, right, was she's in a relationship with a guy and he's a mama's boy, right? It's a competing attachment for him. Oh, suddenly I have to compete for your attention. It's not just me
Mm,
and you, it's me, you, and your mom, right? You're turning towards your mom. And this is something I will say to clients, when I'm constantly assessing them come in, I'm like, hey, there are really two things we have to be mindful of. Like, are there any active ongoing affairs right now? And obviously, there's ethical non-monogamy, which we can talk about as a side piece of our conversation. But, um, and ooh, I also ask, are there any, I don't like to use the word addictions, but like dependencies of some sort that require a higher level of care because that also is a competing attachment. That's something that's robbing your attention from actually being present with your partner, really,
mhm.
you know, accessible, reliable, and engaged. So
Yeah.
anything your partner's turning to, right, instead of turning towards you, and they're turning to something outside their relationship, pornography, affairs, alcohol, work, rival relationships, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So that's really what it is. It's tough. I think sometimes I do see it a lot with the substance use disorders I work with, and especially kind of my very ambitious couples that are sometimes really drawn to their work, right? And
Mhm.
have long work hours and meetings and that can become a competing attachment. Cell phones, video gaming. Gosh, the number of people I have that go, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's there's so many ways that someone can experience this because our phones can be in our hand all the time. Um, there, so you're familiar with the still face experiment that was
yes.
done back in what, the 80s or 90s? The
Mhm.
video is online on YouTube. You can go check it out. But did you see the more modern version? I think it was a TED Talk, believe it was. And it
Okay.
was probably like a 7 or 8 year old girl from Australia, maybe something like that. And she explains this video and it's a still face experiment redone. And what it is it's a dad with his cell phone and a baby.
Mhm.
And the dad is playing with the baby, and then is on his phone. And he's on his phone, and then baby's kind of like, "Hey, come play with me." And the baby's a toddler, so this child is a little bit older than the original Sophie experiment. So it's trying to interact with dad. It's hold on, and then you see the child become sad. And this little 8-year-old girl also did a phenomenal job in explaining all of what's happening in this video and how she goes, yeah, and then the baby's sad. And now the baby feels left alone by their dad. And so it just totally depicts how hardwired attachment is and
Yeah.
how we are so attuned to when someone is giving us that attention and when they're not, and how much it hurts when we don't receive it. Because it's not that, even with kids, it's not that they need it all the time. And people have this idea that, and especially I think where Sue Johnson's work actually created some pivots was there was the idea in parenting that kids need to self soothe. And so if a child is crying in the middle of the night, don't go in, let them cry it
Yeah.
out. And I heard Sue talk about this on a podcast where she said, absolutely not. You have to go in. You cannot, a child doesn't know how to self soothe and regulate. They need someone to help them through it. But once they're helped through it, you can put them back down, they'll be asleep again. And so I think that there's this chronic aversion to to dependency, and people will conflate dependency and codependency with interdependence. Will push away to say, well, you need to deal with that on your own. That's a you problem because I
Yeah.
need to be on my phone, or I need to be doing work, or I need to be watching my show,
Yeah.
or I'm catching up on TikTok.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Oh my gosh, just that story, like, gives me goosebumps. Yeah,
Yeah.
brings up, like, a lot. It's so true, and especially in adults, like, just having the language to say, "Hey, I don't have the capacity or bandwidth in this moment, and I'm coming right back to you.
Mhm.
Be present. I can be attuned to you," right? Like, I don't know about you, but I was trained in the ARC model, the attachment, self-regulation, and competency model for, like, when I was working with families and kiddos. And
Mhm.
that was, like, the core component, that attunement. I love that you brought in that word when you were talking.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was like, we do
Yeah.
need to soothe, right? We have to soothe ourselves first to then soothe, um, the other. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't trained in ARC. I was trained in another acronym called Family Centered Treatment, which was
Okay.
very much based in structural family therapy. And what that one did, I thought was kind of interesting, was we created what we called crisis cards for everyone in the
Okay.
family.
Okay.
So it was, these are the 5 things that you're going to do if you need to emotionally regulate. And this is, when you're pretty dysregulated in a really heightened way, instead of doing the normal behavior, that you're going to do this instead.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so there would be times where we would have to put limits to it. Because if mom needed some alone time, mom wasn't going to go into the room for 30 minutes while children are going to be out there playing by themselves. It was mom's going to be taking 5 and then coming back, right?
Yeah.
So it was a, how do we do this in a constructive way, in a healthy way? But the idea was that you need to be able to help yourself in some ways regulate to be able to attune. So
Yeah.
it was recognizing the and both. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. I
Mhm.
I love that. I just don't, it's hard. I don't think we're taught these intricate models as much on the graduate level, right? We're taught classic CBT and kind of more solution focused therapy, which is great. Those are great, like top down approaches, but I like more of the bottom up, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I can imagine talking about the example of, let's say, a couple who
Mhm.
they're both in jobs where one's in private equity and the other one's a doctor, and
Mhm.
they're on their phones all the time, or they're on their laptops all the time, or whatever
Yeah.
it might be, right? And I can imagine that in talking with them in a couple session, that there might be that sense of my identity also lies in my work. And
Yep.
my identifier is what I'm clinging to. So that competing attachment is work. And then some might say, and there's, because again, like you're mentioning, there's so many ways to go about therapy, right? And some of it might be, okay, well, I can change the behavior. But if you change the behavior, you're not necessarily getting to the core part that's going, but what part of you is feeding? What
Yeah.
part of you are you really drawn into where work is actually pulling you away from your
Yep.
family? Work is pulling
Yeah.
you away from your relationship. So,
Yeah.
what is happening here in this attachment to work? But
Yep.
it's really feeding a part of you as an identity. And
Absolutely.
that's the part that's getting in the way in your
Right.
relationship.
Yes. And I think that that's the work as couples therapists that we need to really do. We have to really understand what purpose that competing attachment is serving. And for you, you just said like the identity piece, right? Yeah, oftentimes there are a lot of ambitious individuals, right? Their work becomes their identity, becomes how they get their intrinsic kind of self-worth, right?
Mhm.
Think about it. If you're in a romantic relationship with someone and that person, to no fault of their own, but is trying so hard to seek connection with you and start to be critical of you all the time, you're not going to want to lean into that relationship where you're not appreciated or valued or wanted and you start to feel like you're failing,
Mhm.
right? You're
Mhm.
gonna wanna turn outward. You're gonna wanna go to the work space where you suddenly feel like, "I'm worthy of something. I'm not." Oftentimes, I hear my withdrawers say all the time, "I'm a piece of shit," right? Like, you're gonna
Mhm.
wanna be in that place where you're feeling connected to something. And so we need to really start to ask couples the really hard questions of like, what do we do? Well, we have to really identify and understand the role of this competing attachment for the partner, right? What role is this alcohol serving? Does it bring you relief in the moment after a stressful day, right?
Mhm.
Versus turning in and saying your partner, "Hey, I had a really bad day at work," right? Can you just listen? Can you just hold space for
Mhm.
that, right? Or video gaming. Okay, well, it's my time to just like totally unwind and dissociate and like be in my headspace and, you know, that's fine, but there needs to be some kind of containment around it.
Mhm.
I think
Boundaries where one begins and another ends. It can't be that
yes.
this is all the time.
Yeah, social media, right? Gaming, affairs and infidelity, that's a really big one. Rival relationships. Yeah.
Sure. So here's a question. Let's say that someone is going, you know, I really want to be able to turn to my partner and say, hey, I had a really long, stressful day. Will you be there for me? But I don't want to be a burden on them because I also know that they had a long, stressful day. And the other person also says, I know that they're really going through that work and I feel like they just need a long time. So I'm just going to leave them alone.
Okay. So do you want me to like actually
Yeah, go
say,
for it. Yes,
like, you
go
want to
in.
be my, yeah.
Do Bethany. Give me the Bethany special.
No, whoa. Valentine's Day is tomorrow.
Yes. That's so
Okay.
funny.
Yeah, so it's okay, let's slow it down. So you're having a bad day and you actually
Mhm.
want to lean into your partner and you want to say, "Hey, something's coming up for me." Right? Okay. So
Sure.
but what I'm hearing you say is I'm actually afraid to ask you. I'm afraid that if I share this with you, I'm going to burden you. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously there's a lot more intricacy we would do. We deepen and distill that emotion. We really want to get to it. But I'd say to them, what would it be like to just say that? Say, hey, I've had a really bad day, and yet I don't want to burden you. And I'm really scared that if I share this with you, I'm going to burden you.
That
Yeah,
it feels
give it back
really
to me.
vulnerable. Yeah, it feels really vulnerable to say that. I feel like I'm admitting something if I
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah. What do you feel like you're admitting? What are you admitting? What's that vulnerability about? Let's really talk.
I'm I'm admitting that there is something that I can't do for myself. And I'm typically the one who is the independent one.
Yeah, that's something you really pride yourself on.
Yeah.
It's really important for you to have that independence. It's kept you as successful as you are, right?
And I feel like it's what drew my partner to me.
Yeah. Oh, so actually, when you say that to me, Brittany, I hear you say I'm a little scared.
Yeah, I am scared.
Actually, show you my vulnerability. Maybe you won't see me the same way, the way in which you once saw me that attracted you to me, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I bet.
gosh, I that makes sense. I would be scared too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And that actually, kind of stepping aside from that, right? That right there is something we hear a lot. Everybody in my life has always relied on me. That is what I'm good at. I'm good at being the reliable one, the independent one, but I actually need you, right? Oh, I see this
Yeah.
dynamic play out all the time, especially, right, when kids start to come in the picture, right? Because the research shows there's a lot of marital dissatisfaction once kids come into the picture. And so I'll hear, often the partner in the relationship who's the breadwinner often would be like, I feel like I can't rely on you. I feel like I can't turn to you for things. And all this pressure's on me. And I have to be the one that's like independent and really trying to navigate and manage all this stuff. Right.
Mhm.
And then sometimes the attachment strategies will even change, where often a withdrawer will become a bit of a reactive withdrawer, kind of lean into more pursuant tendencies. Yeah.
Interesting. Because, do you think that's because the relational system is trying to find homeostasis?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that this part
Yeah.
of them is then going, actually, now that I see you turning towards a child and attuning to their needs a lot more, I'm recognizing that there's a strain for us. So that now, even though my OG tendency has been to withdraw and be alone, but now I'm actually going to pursue because our relational dynamic needs some sort of connection and I need some sort of connection.
That definitely is a possible scenario for sure.
Okay,
That definitely can be a possible scenario.
sure.
Sure. There's a lot of people that could have some abandonment stuff come up. Yeah. I think this independence piece you're talking about though, that's a real one I see. People really put a lot of pressure on themselves
I bet. I bet.
to be independent.
I think because what we were talking about a little before we started the podcast is modern dating. And what I feel like modern dating is getting wrong is the idea that you have to be so independent that everyone's trying to then find their quote unquote perfect match, right? But
Mhm.
that the friction on top of the frictionless ideals, it's then also that you're so independent, you got your shit together. And I feel like I need to be a perfect package to present to you that I've got my shit together. And that people are kind of looking for the perfect package, not what are we going to have to co-create with each other. So there's and Logan Yuri's work, but she has that analogy where it's either the startup or the merger, that in your
Yeah.
20s, life is like a startup and you're figuring out together, you're figuring out your roles and how to do life together. And
Mhm.
there's some messiness. Maybe one does want to go back to grad school. Maybe one does want to move and we figure out how to do that. Whereas when you start to get into your 30s and you're more established, it's, well, I want someone who's more established. I want someone who's ambitious and has a 401k and has maybe a house or whatever the markers are, right? But
Oh
it's I
yeah, you're in
want
my
she
brain.
yeah, right. It's because
No shame
it
there.
is like right because it there
Yeah.
is I think there is a sense of there are some friction points that I feel and hope that you've already gone through to say that now you're ready in this next phase to then date someone who's also in that same phase. I think it is that people kind of we don't like to talk about status when we're dating, but there is a bit of status matching. Bridgerton loves to talk about status matching, right? But it's like, but in modern dating, that doesn't seem to be as much talked about, but it kind of is because what you're looking for is someone who has also leveled up their game in the same way that you have. And even maybe even you want to see them level up even more than you. And that's an attractive mating quality.
All right.
So I,
So I'm trying to think about this from more of a attachment-based perspective. I know
yeah.
we're getting, no, this is crazy. But like really getting curious with yourself, like what purpose does having that person in my life with that status serve? Right? Like
Ooh, great
what
question.
need of it is it meeting, right? Like we all have wants, needs, and requirements. And I love Logan Yuri because she really talks about how there are like after a while, her book, How Not to Die Alone, is like freaking phenomenal. I love her. She's
Hmm.
amazing. But she talks about how we do need individuals who have a growth mindset. And I do think there has been, it's so multifactorial because there is a big emphasis in generational shift right now where we are so growth oriented. And um, I think part of that comes with this idea that we do want a partner who is growth oriented. And I wonder to some extent if it's fear based, right?
It's an intimacy blocker. I think
It
having
is an
really high
intimacy blocker.
standards, right? I think because you can always be growing and you can always hit the next marker, but
Yeah.
if that doesn't have an end point, then what? Like, where, at what point are you, or do you feel value and valuable to then find that in someone else and to say, hey, I see you in the value that you bring as you are now, not for
Not
who you can be.
exactly. And that's where, and people do get stuck in that, right? They often will date on potential or,
Mhm.
um, and I think the other thing that Logan Yuri says that really, really resonates with me that I love so much. And I think Bea Voice also talks about this, but you know, you need people who have good skills to fight. And I think that's the thing is people can't sit in that discomfort anymore, right? We look at relationships and we're like, oh, they're great. They never fight, right? They never argue. And the truth is, like, no, the best relationships have conflict. They just know how to manage it and sit with it. And right, they they don't stop trying and they don't avoid, right?
Mhm.
They can tolerate it. They know, hey, we're in this sticky spot right now. We're in our cycle. We need to take some time to step aside and regulate and then come back and take ownership. And I always tell my couples, ask yourself these three questions. What is this negative cycle bringing up into me? What does it
Mhm.
remind me of? Right? Because there's usually a raw spot. And then
Mhm.
what do I need to feel safe again? And I
Mhm.
tell him, you got to take a little bit of ownership. Because if you don't take ownership of how you hurt your partner, you're not going to move forward. It's not about this idea of like, right, oh, I told you it was my birthday and you totally like disregarded it. And suddenly your partner's like goes kind of on the defense and their voice could be totally normal, but their messaging is defensive and they say, wait, you never told me. I didn't hear that. Oh God, if I like, what? No. Versus being like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. If I was in your shoes and that was my experience too, I would be so hurt, right? There is no objective truth when it comes to relationships, right? And that's where the couples get stuck. They really want that objective truth. And we're again going back to your point though, like so side tangent because this is so fascinating, all this stuff. But like in
Yeah.
modern dating and wanting someone with status, right? I think you need to, as an individual, get curious with yourself. What is that status of that person? What is their, ability to have a fancy job or provide financial stability or, have a lot of friends or whatever it is? What is that? How is that meeting a need for you? Right.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
need to really deepen the work and get curious with that with yourself, right?
So if a woman says, I only date 6'2" and over, what is the need that that's meeting for you? Could be a good question.
That is
It,
like
which
a
I think it, which I think it could be, because I think,
right.
um,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's get curious. Okay, so something I would probably ask is like, hey, okay, so tell me about an experience you had where you dated someone who wasn't 6'2".
Hmm.
What did that elicit in you? What did that bring up for you?
Yeah.
Right? Something came up for you, and let's just get curious about that.
Oh, I love this. This is so good because you can do this with so many things. Yeah.
We we all, more than ever in a society where we can't trust and we're told more and more not to have emotional dependence, we're constantly going to strive for people who are highly independent.
Mm.
Because then if they fail us, we think and create this false sense of safety in our brain that we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Like it's just a false sense of safety, all this status and shiny things. And,
Hmm.
it really is. And at the end of the day, you can have that all, but if there's no connection, forget it.
Right.
Speaking on personal experience.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, I mean, research shows this. There are plenty of stories that show this. I mean, that it's what are people's, the longest Harvard study that was done was the quality of your life depends on the quality of your relationships. And that is in terms of health, that's in terms of happiness, that's in terms of overall life satisfaction, that's even in terms of success. And that's an overlooked marker. So the deeper quality of relationships that you have, the more likely that you're able to thrive in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet we miss the mark on that sometimes so much.
Mhm.
Also, I mean, yeah, that's tricky. That's tricky. I think if there's one thing I could tell, people, especially out there, poor things in this dating world, right? Is right. Everything I think I've even heard you say when we've had, our offline chats or whatever is like, get out there, be in real life. Logan Ury says this too, right? Esther
Mhm.
Perel, I think, even says this too. She was on Diary of a CEO saying this, like, get out, meet people in real life.
Mhm.
You
The
have to.
best dating app is not on your phone.
Yes.
Mhm.
Right.
It's so true.
It
Yeah.
is. Don't be afraid to, that's hard. When we remove, circling back to the very first point you and I made, like when we remove friction and pain from life, we remove the ability to connect with people and share, right? Like, kind of need that friction.
Mhm.
But, and now is, God, we see Chat GPT all the time. It's validating us left and right. So why would we ever want to turn to someone for co-regulation if we have this
Mhm.
little robotic device or screen that we type into?
And it's so interesting because what you hear people talk about in real life outside of the chat GPTs and other AI sources that are providing us with validation and what we want to hear all day. But is it if you met someone who did that to you, you'd be so bored. It's how many people would say there's nothing to attach to. I feel like I'm not getting to know a person. They're just parroting me and what I want to hear. And I don't always want that.
No. Yeah.
That in real life, it's very different. And because it meets a real human need versus when we're on these things and online and our feeds curate to what we want to hear and our AI source is telling us exactly that we're right in whatever scenario we give it. That it meets us, sure, it reinforces our own ego and our own perceptions and our own, like, yeah, look how great I am, or whatever it might be, right? But human relationships, we're drawn to the messiness. We're truly drawn to other people. And when we talk about diversity, what we're talking about is other and different and bring it in and it's enrichment. And when we think about it in food or in culture or in whatever else it might be that we celebrate it, but we don't think of that in our relationships and how we can celebrate the differences. What is it that's going to be complementary? What are the friction points that I want to sign up for?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
You have a title of a new book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The friction points we sign up for.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, I just read Dopamine Nation. And I think, yeah, it's a lot of what we talk about,
It is.
right? We're turning to something outside of people in our life that really care about us and need us and rely on us, or we rely on them or try to. And granted, not everyone's privileged in the world to have connection.
Sure. Yeah.
So honoring that. But
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you're really, I'm so fond of the fact that you can kind of do this podcast and get this information out there. And I don't know, I think it's still taboo for a lot of people. And my favorite couples are the ones that aren't even married and come in.
Mm.
And they're like, yeah, we just want to we just want things to be okay as we build our future. And I say, I love that.
It's so great.
Yeah.
It's, I think of it as relational wellness, that is a true practice.
Like I tell my clients, it's emotional muscle memory we're getting, right? We're practicing in here, we're creating safety in here so that when you leave my office, eventually those blocks aren't going to be there and you're going to be able to do it. No sweat. But it takes time and patience.
Yes, it does. Anything that we didn't hit on that you want
Oh,
to
I mean, I
discuss?
think competing attachments are really just pretty self-explanatory, right? I think
They're
people
very,
get, oh
again,
no, go ahead.
it feels like they're very transparent. You can
Hmm.
see it. You can very, it's very visible. It's very obvious. Whenever you're on your phone and on TikTok and you're not talking to your partner, you're both sitting on the couch and you were away from each other for 8 hours during the day and you put the kids to bed and now it's the end of the day and you're not talking, that's a disruption in your relationship.
Yeah, you're not able to turn towards your partner with that vulnerability. You're tapping out.
Yeah.
And I get it. I think it's hard. Sometimes you are talking to people every day for your job, right? Like how many times do you go home and I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Just need a moment, right? But also then trying to kind of re-regulate and come back and work through that. I think competing attachments really become a way for people to engage in emotion regulation and self-soothing, but in a way that hasn't been taught in the context of attachment bonds with loved ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can leave their partner and individual just feeling really alone, jealous, isolated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's why affairs are a lot more common than we think. And I know there's definitely a negative stigma towards individuals who are often the affair partner. Um, but I think that oftentimes what we see, obviously, there are individuals that have, you know, addictions of some sort, but oftentimes, they can feel very lonely in relationships and then decide to turn towards someone else. And the work we need to do is figure out, hey, what got you to that place where you felt so alone that you needed to turn away?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know.
Right.
So tricky. I love that you're doing that though, because we are not given the manual. We are not given the
Mhm.
manual to do relationships.
No,
Right.
we're not. Yeah. Hopefully this in particular, and I so appreciate you for coming on and doing this. And I
Gosh,
hope you come
I
on
feel
again.
honored to be in your presence.
Oh, well, thank you. I truly hope you come on again because there's so much here, and we've really just scratched the surface on all that you have to offer and on EFT in general, but definitely on all that you have to offer. So I
Oh.
so appreciate you. And where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So they could just literally go to my website. So I'm Bethany Argenio Therapy NC.com. I work with couples in New York City and Boston virtually, and then North Carolina virtually and in person. And I think the one thing I will say is I do have a blog post that I try to post every week and somehow link it to something pop cultural related. I think last week was on like the Super Bowl or something. Sad the Pats lost, but it's okay.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but I do try and give little tidbits here and there on like ways to support and help people because I don't ever want to see us lose connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I'm so passionate about it, right?
Mhm.
We have to see the good in people. Everybody has a story, and every behavior that doesn't feel safe for us, just try and remember it's coming from a place of that person protecting a pain that they just cannot access. But we can't always understand that.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. Oh, Brittany, great. Love this. I'm gonna go
I
eat
love
some
this.
candy now and just
Yes. All
turn
right.
towards my own competing attachment outside of my support system.
Oh my
But
gosh, yes. Don't we all have them?
oh,
I appreciate you, and we
yeah.
will link all that in the show notes. And until next time, everyone, stay connected.